terms of the opportunity set within the sector, they are huge. Take, for example, agriculture. You have, on the one hand, 84 million hectares of arable land within the country, of which only about 50% is currently being utilized. So opportunities exist literally at every point in the value chain, from production through to processing and all the way to retail. In the power sector, Nigeria produces about a tenth of the power being generated in South Africa, despite having a population of 3 times. Despite there being sort of challenges from tariff issues to collections issues to commercial and technical loss issues, there still remain significant opportunities within the space. If you look at the real estate space, you have 17 million units in deficit within the housing space. In addition to that, you also have opportunities within the retail, the commercial, as well as the hospitality. So within the healthcare space, much has been touted about the significant amount of medical tourism that exists. I think last year it was put at about $1 billion. I think that in itself presents a significant amount of opportunities for healthcare entrepreneurs, all the way from diagnostic centers to full-blown hospitals. And the last sector that I'd like to discuss is the transportation sector. This is actually a very broad sector consisting of inland waterways, roads, aviation sector, as well as ports. And I think whilst what we currently have can be described as adequate at best, a significant amount of investment is still required in order to upgrade the transport sector in general to world-class status. I think one of the key binding constraints to infrastructure development in the country is funding. It's always a huge issue when talking about infrastructure, principally because the amount of capital expenditures required is huge. So I think if I was to think of my top 3 sources, there will be number 1, the budget. So directly from government procuring contractors to actually effect the construction work. I think in 2016, 30% of the budget is actually focused on capital expenditure, which is a huge increase relative to previous years. The second source for infrastructure funding typically is pension funds, and it's because of the long-term nature of pension funds. In the case of Nigeria, there are a significant amount of risks involved with infrastructure investing, and those risks need to be fully hedged out before the pension funds can be brought in. A number of ways that this can happen include the partial risk guarantee from the World Bank, as well as this new concept that seems to be gaining steam, which is the credit enhancement facility, where you have infrastructure projects issue bonds, and you have a guarantor actually wrap these bonds, taking away the risks through the credit rating of the guarantor, such that pension funds can buy these bonds. The third route is obviously from your multilaterals and bilaterals. And finally, PPPs. Given the significant amount of fiscal constraints being experienced by the government, bringing private sector actors into infrastructure investing is also a way to reduce the amount of sort of financial exposure by the government, and at the same time having infrastructure development within the country. I think in terms of outlook for infrastructure investments within the country, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. On the one hand, we are seeing a renewed commitment by the government to actually channel funding towards the sector, as evidenced by the 2016 budget. I think secondly, there's also a renewed commitment by the government to create that enabling environment which is fundamental to attract private sector actors into the sector. And I think thirdly, a lot of initiatives are also going into trying to catalyze the attraction of PFAs, i.e. the pension funds, to actually begin to fund infrastructure development within the country. And I think this could be a breakthrough because the nature of the capital being managed by the PFAs is exactly what is needed for infrastructure development to thrive within the country. So I think all in all, 2016 should be a year that we can look forward to optimistically about infrastructure investing within the country.